All right, so get this. Imagine a world where your freedom is absolute.
Oh, wow.
You can do anything,
Yeah.
achieve anything, no limits, no safety nets.
Sounds pretty utopian.
Exhilarating, right?
Yeah.
But UT, and here's the twist, this unfettered freedom might come at the cost of fairness.
That's interesting.
Intrigued.
Yeah. Yeah, fellas.
So that's why we're diving deep into this very tension today,
Okay.
exploring the lives and philosophies of two figures who embody these contrasting ideals,
All right.
Javier Milei and Oren.
Interesting. I'm familiar with their work.
Have you read the book yet?
I have. Yeah. It's quite a provocative read.
What's fascinating about these two is they both start with the same goal, a thriving society.
Right. A common ground.
But their paths diverge dramatically,
Yeah, for sure.
leading them to champion very different approaches to achieving it.
Very different indeed.
Absolutely. We've got Milei, a libertarian forged in the fires of Argentina's economic turmoil,
Right.
who sees government as public enemy number one.
A classic libertarian stance.
He's all about unleashing the power of the individual, the invisible hand of the market.
Yeah.
Freedom is his rallying cry,
Freedom above all else.
non-negotiable paramount.
Makes sense given his background.
But then on the other side of the ring, we have Oren.
Now he's coming from a different perspective.
Cass takes a more pragmatic approach.
Yes, more grounded in the realities of everyday life.
He recognizes the power of markets, but also their potential to create winners and losers.
Right, not everyone benefits equally.
He's concerned about the human cost of unchecked capitalism,
A more humanistic approach, I'd say.
advocating for a system where fairness underpins freedom.
So freedom with some safeguards.
So it's not just about letting the market run wild.
It's about setting some boundaries.
It's about creating a level playing field where everyone has a chance to succeed.
Equal opportunity, that's the key.
Even if it means, putting some reins on that wild stallion of capitalism.
Taming the beast, so to speak.
But that brings up a huge question. Can these seemingly contradictory ideals coexist?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Can we have a society that's both dynamically free and fundamentally fair?
A tall order for sure.
That's the million-dollar question. And to really wrap our heads around it, we need to go beyond the theoretical and delve into the historical.
Looking to the past for answers.
Because this tension between freedom and fairness isn't new.
A tale as old as time.
It's been playing out for centuries, shaping civilizations, sparking revolutions, and influencing policies.
We're products of that tension.
Okay, so history lesson time.
Buckle up.
But hold on, before you groan. I promise this isn't your boring high school textbook stuff.
No dry lectures here.
We're going to time travel through some pivotal moments.
Sounds fun.
See how this freedom-fairness dance is played out on the grand stage of history.
I'm ready to waltz through time.
We'll start in ancient Athens, the birthplace of democracy.
Ah, the cradle of Western civilization.
A society that celebrated individual liberty and intellectual freedom.
A golden age for thought and expression.
This is great, right?
On the surface, absolutely.
There's always a catch.
Right. There usually is.
Athenian freedom was built on the backs of slaves.
A dark side to their enlightenment.
Their society flourished. Their ideas revolutionized the world. BGT. It was a freedom enjoyed by a select few.
Freedom for some, not for all.
Built on a foundation of stark inequality.
A contradiction at the heart of their system.
And that, as we'll see, has some unsettling implications for us today.
History often rhymes, doesn't it?
So freedom without fairness, a shaky foundation indeed.
A lesson worth remembering.
But then we leap forward to ancient Rome, a society obsessed with law, order, and structure.
A very different approach.
It seems like they were all about fairness,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Well, that's debatable.
To a degree.
They certainly tried.
The Romans developed complex legal systems, public works projects, and attempted to create a sense of shared prosperity.
A more organized and structured society.
But even with all their laws and regulations, wealth concentrated in the hands of the few.
The same problem persists.
Sounds familiar. And guess what? That concentration of wealth, that growing gap between the haves and have-nots, ultimately contributed to the fall of the Roman Republic.
Wow, so even fairness taken to an extreme wasn't enough.
So even with a focus on fairness, even with attempts to distribute wealth and opportunity, their system couldn't hold. So what does that tell us about the delicate balance between freedom and fairness?
Maybe it's not about one or the other, but finding some kind of middle ground.
Man, these ancient civilizations are dropping some serious truth bombs. But hold on, because things are about to get really explosive as we jump ahead of the French Revolution.
Oh, yeah, things are about to get messy.
This is where liberty, equality, and fraternity take center stage.
A recipe for revolution.
And we'll see how the struggle between freedom and fairness ignites a firestorm that will reshape Europe.
Can't wait to dive into that.
Stay tuned for more freedom, fairness fireworks.
I'm on the edge of my seat. Welcome back to our deep dive, where we're exploring this age-old struggle between freedom and fairness.
And we've just seen how ancient civilizations grappled with this tension with some pretty dramatic consequences.
Exactly. But this isn't just ancient history. This struggle is alive and well today, playing out in our economies, our political systems, even our daily lives.
Right. Earlier we were talking about these two contrasting figures, Javier Milei and Oren. It strikes me that their approaches are like building these metaphorical towers, one based on freedom, the other on fairness.
That's a great analogy. And if we think about it, those historical examples we just discussed, they each added a brick, so to speak, to these competing towers.
So Athens, with its emphasis on individual liberty but reliance on slavery, that's like a shaky foundation for the Freedom Tower, beautiful but unstable.
Precisely. And Rome, with its focus on law and order, but ultimately succumbing to wealth inequality, that adds a layer of complexity to the Fairness Tower.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this tower metaphor really works. But let's fast forward a bit. We can't talk about this freedom-fairness tension without addressing the elephant in the room, the Industrial Revolution.
Yes. The Industrial Revolution, a period of unprecedented technological advancement, economic growth, and massive social upheaval.
It's like someone poured rocket fuel on this whole debate. Suddenly you have these giant factories springing up cities, swelling with workers seeking opportunity and wealth being generated on a scale never seen before.
But that wealth came at a cost. The freedom to amass fortunes for some meant exploitation and hardship for others. Think child labor, unsafe working conditions, and a widening gap between the factory owners and the workers.
So it's like the Freedom Tower is getting taller, more impressive, but the cracks in its foundation are becoming more apparent.
And that's where we see the Fairness Tower starting to rise in response. Think about the labor movements, the push for social reforms, the recognition that unbridled economic freedom could have devastating consequences for a large segment of society.
Right. It's like people are saying, hold on, this unchecked freedom isn't working for everyone. We need some rules, some protections, some sense of fairness.
Exactly. And this tension culminates in the 20th century with the rise of two competing ideologies, capitalism and communism.
The ultimate freedom versus fairness showdown. You have capitalism championing individual liberty, free markets, and the pursuit of profit. And then you have communism advocating for economic equality, collective ownership, and the elimination of class distinctions.
It was a clash of titans, each side convinced they held the key to a better future. And the Cold War became the battleground for this ideological struggle.
But here's the thing. Neither system delivered on its promises perfectly. Capitalism, while generating wealth and innovation, often led to inequality and social unrest. And communism, while aiming for equality, often resulted in authoritarianism and economic stagnation. So it seems like both towers, despite their grand aspirations, had some serious structural flaws.
And that brings us to the present day. We're still grappling with this tension, trying to find that elusive balance between freedom and fairness.
And this isn't just some abstract philosophical debate. It's playing out in the real world, impacting our lives in very tangible ways.
Think about the choices you make every day as a consumer. Do you buy the cheapest product, often made overseas under questionable labor conditions, exercising your freedom of choice? Or do you opt for the ethically sourced, locally made product, even if it costs more, prioritizing fairness?
It's like every shopping trip becomes a mini referendum on our values. But it goes beyond just consumer choices. It's about the kind of society we want to live in. Do we prioritize individual liberty above all else, even if it means accepting greater inequality?
Or do we strive for a more equitable society, even if it means some limitations on individual freedom? These are the questions policymakers wrestle with every day.
It's about finding that sweet spot where individual initiative and collective responsibility can coexist and even reinforce each other.
Precisely. And it's a challenge that requires constant dialogue, adaptation, and a willingness to experiment.
Because the world is changing. Technology, globalization, climate change. All these forces are reshaping the economic landscape, making this freedom-fairness debate even more urgent, more complex.
So as we move into the final part of our deep dive, let's shift our focus to one of the most compelling case studies in this whole debate, China.
China. Their economic rise has been meteoric, and they've done it by playing the freedom-fairness game in a way that's both fascinating and, well, a little unnerving for some.
Exactly. They've embraced market principles driving incredible economic growth, but they've also maintained tight control over their economy and society.
Which raises a huge question. Does China's success prove that maybe a blend of freedom and fairness, even with some limitations on individual liberty, is the most effective path?
So we left off talking about China and their approach.
A really interesting case study.
Welcome back. We're wrapping up our deep dive into this Freedom Fairness Balancing Act, and we've landed on China, a country that's become Exhibit A for how messy this whole thing can get.
Yeah, it really throws a wrench into those simple narratives of, freedom versus fairness.
What's fascinating about China is that they've built their economic miracle by selectively embracing and rejecting both freedom and fairness. It's like they're playing both sides of the chessboard at the same time.
Right. They've used free market principles to turbocharge their growth,
Yeah, to incredible effect, you have to admit.
but haven't shied away from state intervention and even protectionist policies when it suited their goals.
It's a very pragmatic approach, not ideological at all.
And the results speak for themselves
Absolutely. They've lifted millions out of poverty.
and become a global powerhouse.
A force to be reckoned with.
A 2T, and it's a big...
Here comes a caveat.
This success has come with significant compromises on individual liberties and political freedoms.
That's the trade-off they've made.
So it's like their version of the Freedom Tower is gleaming and futuristic,
A shining beacon of progress.
but built within a walled garden,
Yeah, you might have economic opportunity.
but less room to dissent or challenge the system.
A controlled environment for sure.
Exactly. And this raises a crucial question for democracies. Can we learn anything from China's approach without sacrificing the values we hold dear?
That's the challenge, isn't it?
Can we find ways to promote fairness and economic security without resorting to heavy-handed state control?
It's a delicate balancing act.
It's a tough question, and honestly, there are no easy answers.
Nope. It's a complex issue with lots of nuances.
But what this deep dive has shown us is that this isn't a binary choice between unfettered freedom and absolute fairness.
It's not an either-or situation.
It's more like a constant calibration,
Finding the right mix.
a process of understanding trade-offs, experimenting with policies, and adapting to the ever-changing dynamics of the world.
It's an ongoing conversation and experiment.
We've seen throughout history that leaning too heavily on either side has consequences.
Yeah, there's a price to pay for extremes.
Too much freedom without fairness can lead to exploitation and instability.
It's a recipe for social unrest.
Too much fairness without considering the role of individual initiative can stifle growth and innovation.
You need that spark of individual drive.
It's about finding that sweet spot, a dynamic equilibrium, where personal liberty and collective well-being work in tandem,
Where everyone benefits in some way.
where individuals have the opportunity to thrive, but also the support to navigate the inevitable bumps in the road.
A safety net for when things go wrong.
And this is where you come in.
That's right. The listener plays a part.
Because, as we've explored today, this tension between freedom and fairness plays out not just in grand historical narratives or policy debates, but in the choices we make every day.
It's all around us.
Think about the products you buy,
Where you spend your money matters.
the companies you support, even the way you vote.
Your actions have consequences.
Are you prioritizing the cheapest option or considering the ethical implications?
Sometimes the cheapest comes at a hidden cost.
Are you advocating for policies that promote opportunity for all or just for a select few?
Who benefits from the decisions being made?
These choices might seem small, but collectively they shape the world we live in.
We all have a role to play.
And as this deep dive has shown, there's no one-size-fits-all solution.
There's no magic formula.
What matters is that you're informed, engaged, and actively participating in this ongoing conversation.
Stay curious. Stay involved.
So as we wrap up, we leave you with this.
One last thought.
The pursuit of a society that balances freedom and fairness is an ongoing journey.
It's a constant work in progress.
It requires open minds, critical thinking, and a willingness to challenge the status quo.
Don't be afraid to question things.
And who knows, maybe through dialogue, experimentation, and a commitment to finding that sweet spot, we can build a future where both individuals and society as a whole can truly flourish.
A future we can all be proud of.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure exploring these ideas with you.